Try clicking that.
Virtual. Start video. Start video.
Are we set, Jason?
Okay, we are now live on Facebook.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our November meeting of the Sonoma County Coast Municipal Advisory Council. This is our last meeting of this crew, and in January we'll have some changes and some continuing people. Cindy, would you like to take it on?
Okay, so I'll wait for my flag here and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks, Jason. Okay, here we go. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. So I'm going to call, I think I started this in the last meeting. I'm going to call the alternates also, just because it's nice to know who's here and who's not. So we'll start with Che.
Here.
Beth.
Not on the panel, so she may be able to chime in from the audience.
Oh, okay. Did she attending today or do you know?
Yes.
She is.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thanks. Okay, Scott.
Here.
Annie. Marty.
Yes.
Okay, Paul.
Here.
Ann Yeager.
She's in the attendees.
Okay,
group.
great. Thank you. Abby, if she's
Here.
joined us. Oh, great.
Oh, there she is. Mhm.
Okay. And Wanda is absent this evening. Liz.
I'm here, but okay, oh, let's see. Am I here yet? Oh God. I'll figure out how. I don't know why it's not letting me. Anyway, I'm trying.
Brooks
Here.
and Brian. I thought I saw Brian, so I know he's there.
Brian.
I'm here. Sorry.
Was,
Internet
yeah.
problem.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we're going to go on to the approval of the agenda. And
have
go ahead, Scott.
I
I
have
was
a-
going to.
I have a correction. It's after the agenda, but it's about a notification of the Coast MAC Land Use Committee meeting in December. We canceled that one because of the holidays. Of course, if something comes up, we can call a special meeting. So there's that deletion.
Okay.
Thank you for catching that, Scott.
So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Paul. Great. And who seconded?
I
Sure.
did, maybe.
Oh, Brooks. Okay, got it. Thanks.
God.
Okay, so I'm going to do a roll call. Che,
Hi.
Scott,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Abby,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
Okay. So approved. Now I want to ask if there's any conflicts of interest that any council members need to bring up. Okay, I hear no conflict of interest. And there is no correspondence tonight, correct, Scott?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'll turn this over to Scott for the consent calendar.
So we have the approval of the September 15th minutes. Do we have any corrections or comments about the minutes before we move on them?
I thought they looked great, and I move that we approve them as sent out.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Paul?
And I want to stop for a moment and thanks Marty. He is the greatest editor ever, and that's why they look good. So thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, so we'll start with Che,
Aye.
Scott,
Yes,
Marty,
Yes,
Paul,
Yes.
Abby,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Brooks,
yes,
and Brian.
Yes.
Okay, they're approved.
okay, thank you, Cindy. Now we'll have public comment. Comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to the Sonoma Coast MAC business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Sonoma Coast MAC cannot consider issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Due to the time constraints, comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Do we have it, Jason, do we have anybody in the public that wishes to comment?
We don't have any hands raised. Attendees, if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and I will promote you to allow you to speak.
And Scott, since I'm not a voting member, can I make a comment in the public comment, or how does it work for me?
Certainly.
Okay, so I do have a comment, Jason. First, I wanted to say I think it's great we have the FEMA grant that will help the Timber Cove area with costs, and also someone will come out and survey your property and make recommendations. But with that said, I have heard in the past that the local coastal plan, the LCP, they're looking at a programmable solution for the coast that would include just for fuel management only to make sure you have your defensive space cleared and you know, other items that make your structure more fire resistant in your area. And I haven't heard any more about it. So I'm hoping that will be included in the LCP so we don't have to get a coastal permit to do that. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more, Jason?
Now I'm upside down. Whoops.
Liz?
I have no idea. I just forgot to put my little screen thing up. And now I'm
Is that everybody for public comment?
All for public comment.
That's all, okay. Then moving on, regular calendar items. Supervisor Hopkins is here, and I want to welcome Lynda. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So we've got a few different items to cover today. And one is announcing and welcoming our new MAC representatives for next year, which I am really, really excited to share. So for Bodega Bay, we have Jenny Nichols, who is a relative newcomer to Bodega Bay. She's an enthusiastic, innovative product marketer and product manager, holding an MBA from the Wharton School and a BFA from the Pratt Institute. She was the co-founder and volunteer coordinator of a recycling program on the East Coast and served as an election officer in the South Bay for many years. She's really excited to learn more about her neighbors and the issues that are facing Bodega Bay. Carl Ogier, as the alternate, seems to enjoy demanding roles. So he's a volunteer firefighter with the Bodega Bay Firefighter Protection and Fire Protection District, and his day job is actually a pilot with United Airlines. He and his wife are parents to a 3-year-old with another child on the way. So congratulations to them. With a young family and deeply engaged in the community, Carl really wants to help support efforts to improve the quality of life for the residents of Bodega Bay and even West County beyond. So we will be having a bio forthcoming for Callie Madden, who will be our alternate for Fort Ross and West Cazadero. So all apologies to Callie, but we will introduce her at a future meeting. We also are joined by Jill Lippett, who I think many of you know. She's a retired attorney living on 400 acres in the coastal wilderness, who is very experienced in water and septic issues, forest management, vegetation management, fuel reductions, permitting and construction, and a host of other rural concerns. She's a born networker, and you know she's very active in the community, and she can connect people, ideas, and resources together. She intends to increase outreach via a regular MAC column in the Jenner Community newsletter. Up in Timber Cove, we have Annie Cresswell, who grew up in the coastal hills of Cazadero on Seaview Road, the Ridge, and has been part of the team at the Stewards of the Coast and Redwood since 2002. Annie understands land use, zoning, forestry, community organizing, environmental, and safety issues. She has worked on environmental issues in the area and researched proposed projects through the CDF, Fish and Wildlife, and Regional Water Quality Boards. Through this research, Annie learned the complexity of these projects and the importance of community involvement. Annie's goal is to learn from, be available to, and engage her community in projects, proposals, policies, and other related matters that would either directly or indirectly affect them. Of course, we also have Scott Farmer, the current chair of the Coast MAC, who I think needs no introduction. We are really, really grateful for your service, Chair Farmer. Going over to the Sea Ranch, we also do have Marty Campbell, which I believe that you are all very familiar with as well, and look forward to seeing her continuing to serve as well. So I believe that wraps up our introductions of the MAC reps, and just really, really excited for the folks who are continuing, as well as the new faces that will be joining us in the coming years. So it's an exciting group, and I can't wait to continue to work with all of you and work with the future MAC. So happy to, and Chair Farmer, I want to check in. Do you want me to sort of pause between items or just kind of keep going into redistricting? What's your preference?
I think let's keep going, and then we'll have questions for all of it.
Perfect. Sounds good. So next up is redistricting. And actually, I just emailed Jason a link to a map. And so we might be able to actually share screen in real time. But I did want to provide you with some critical updates on redistricting. Just yesterday, on Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors did vote to move forward a map that dramatically changes sort of the demographics of the 5th district. So currently the map, right, we go into sort of Western Santa Rosa. The new map actually moves Western Santa Rosa into the 3rd district with Central Santa Rosa, which was really one of the primary goals of the Advisory Redistricting Commission, which has been working on this for several months now. And the interesting thing is that it actually takes all of Rohnert Park and puts that in with West County, which actually means that 40% of the residents of the 5th district will now reside within the city limits of Rohnert Park. This number actually could grow if we look at including surrounding areas, such as Sonoma State University, which oddly wasn't included in the 5th district, even though it's really sort of part of Rohnert Park. It's just outside of city limits, as well as adjacent communities like Canyon Manor that are served by the sewer system of Rohnert Park, but are in the unincorporated areas. And so there's going to be a meeting, I believe next Tuesday, that will be a town hall kind of focused at Rohnert Park residents to sort of talk about where the boundaries should be in terms of including unincorporated communities with the quote unquote community of interest of Rohnert Park. And it looks like Jason has been able to pull that up. So the black you can see, those are the existing district boundaries. And then the shaded sort of orangish color there coming in from the west obviously incorporates the entire coastline and then sort of does this dog leg down into Rohnert Park. And I sort of think of it now, the new 2nd district is almost like the fish eating the minnow there in the middle, or Pac-Man or something like that, sort of wrapping around that peninsula into Rohnert Park. There are still some opportunities for additional community engagement on this. I will say that since this was announced yesterday, I think the one thing that is uniting the future 5th district is dislike of this map. I have heard quite a bit of feedback from both Rohnert Park residents as well as West County residents who do not feel that this is appropriate. And I have had the word gerrymandered sort of tossed my way several times today when people look at this map, and some folks are really just cluing in. It's been kind of a process, but you know, a decision really wasn't made until yesterday. However, there is still some opportunity to engage on this. So on November 29th at 11 a.m., the Board of Supervisors will be holding a special meeting to look at possible adjustments to this map. I can't speak for my colleagues how much they are willing to adjust this map, but the consultants, NDC, who is the demographer who has been making these maps, who is in Arizona and really knows very little about Sonoma County, will actually be on hand to redraw lines in real time. So if you have thoughts about this, I would really encourage you to engage on November 29th at 11 a.m. And then on December 7th, that is when hypothetically it's possible that the map could be approved, but likely the final map would be actually approved December 14th because it has to be posted 1 week ahead of time. So it might take a little bit longer than we have in order to get to that December 7th date. So that is kind of the update on redistricting.
You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. So the last thing would be fire services. So we are looking at now, hopefully bringing before the board on December 14th, the final funding for the consolidation of Sonoma County Fire District and Bodega Bay Fire Protection District. There are still some details, as I understand it, being negotiated, and the CEO Cheryl Bratton with the county is really committed to trying to bring together all of the different sort of agreements all at the same time before the board. And so there were some challenges, I think, with negotiating with North County. I believe that we have sort of a final signed agreement with Sonoma County and Bodega Bay, but there are still some outstanding challenges, I believe, maybe, and I don't remember if Gold Ridge is finalized yet, but I know that the North County one was the one that was kind of the most recent hang up and hold up that I had heard of. The county is also looking at a potential fire sales tax ballot initiative that is unlikely, honestly, to go before the voters in June, just given the tight timeline. I think we're probably looking at November at this point in time. And yesterday, the Board of Supervisors did approve a contract that is not to sort of put the ballot on, the measure on the ballot, but really to actually go out and do the community engagement. So I will certainly be seeking input from our coastal and Lower Russian River MACs and making sure that you are all considered stakeholders of interest as these town halls and kind of interview processes go forward. So there'll be some polling, but there will also be meetings with critical stakeholder groups. And I would love to get your feedback, as well as also the other organizations. We also have our folks who are involved with Fire Safe and local fire districts and volunteer fire companies that are part of the MAC. So I look forward to engaging with all of you. And I believe that that is my report.
Thank you. Do any the council members have questions or comments? Raise your hand. Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I hear everybody being very unhappy with this new map, and I know that any change is going to be really hard. Lynda, is there any benefit for us from going from Santa Rosa, where we were part of one city council, to taking over a city where we are being part of a city where we were entirely, that city council is part of the 5th?
So I would say that the benefit really is to Rohnert Park, and this is sort of, but so it's very complicated because the ARC had one representative who was from Rohnert Park who wanted everyone to really wanted to prioritize unifying Rohnert Park. They did that, but then they put it in West County, and the Rohnert Park said that was not the way that we wanted to be unified. And actually they then sent a formal letter saying that they would prefer to be with the 3rd district or the 2nd district, or to actually keep the lines as they were, as opposed to being unified in the 5th district. So this was quite literally their last choice. But the idea behind unifying Rohnert Park was actually to give them more voting power in whatever district they joined. So they would have sort of substantial electoral power in the sort of current proposed version with the 5th district, because they would comprise almost 50% of the population in the one city. So I think that really the emphasis was on their power and sort of not necessarily kind of looking at the dynamic or the balance of the district, or whether there were sort of similarities amongst the communities that were being drawn together. Does that kind of get at what you're asking?
Absolutely. I was hoping there was some kind of benefit, but now I see that could be very negative. So thank you.
I will say, that I have really had a lot of conversations with the Rohnert Park City Council representatives over the past few weeks, and there are some absolutely amazing people serving on the City Council who I do believe have values that are very much West County values, but they also see just the absolute disparity and difference between Rohnert Park, right, and the small rural communities of West County. And I think that right now, with a 50-50 split, more or less, between those two, everyone is sort of afraid that the one interest will completely overwhelm the other. And so that's, I think, the challenge. And certainly it would be, I think, a challenge for governing. Makes it even a little bit longer of a drive between, say, the Sea Ranch and Rohnert Park.
Brooks?
Yeah, I know you say that Rohnert Park will just represent 40% of the population, but they're a united city. I mean, and the rest of us are all strung the 55 miles up and down the coast. And while we support one another and whatnot, it's just, it's really going to be 75-25. Rohnert Park 75, we're 25. I think we're getting the short end of that deal. And I would certainly support leaving our district the way it is.
Elise.
Am I allowed? I'm wondering, one of the things that's challenging when a lot of comments come in is knowing what to support aside from just saying, no, we hate that. Are there other maps proposed that we should be, or that people should be looking at and thinking about whether or not they want to be proponents of those options?
That is a great question. And Brooks, I also really appreciate your feedback. And I do think that is a substantial concern for rural communities, is that within the rural communities, we have pretty divergent interests, but cities sort of tend to be more cohesive. Although I will say that there are also pretty substantial disparities within the city of Roanoke Park. There are sort of the newer sections, there are the older sections that actually struggle with a lot of the similar challenges that we face in West County, in particular in Lower Russian River with respect to homelessness and flooding, for instance. With respect to other map options, there was actually a map that was submitted by ARC Commissioner Eric Koningshofer that did shift Roseland and Moreland into the third, but had kind of a more, I would say, subtle approach to readjusting the district boundaries. So it kind of went into Northwest Santa Rosa a little bit, also sort of in towards Western Windsor, came down a little bit further, actually incorporating some of the communities that I think should be part of the 5th district anyway, south of Sebastopol. People who live in Hessel area, they always think they're in the 5th district. Their sort of home is really Sebastopol. They get confused between me and David all the time. So that it kind of looked, I think, a little bit more at the community identities and the topography. So that was a map. And then actually Roanoke Park also submitted their own map, which also did similar things, and also still moved Roseland and Moreland into the 3rd district. So those were kind of the 3 maps that I was really looking at in the board meeting. The other maps that were submitted by the consultants were horrible. One of them literally gave me James Gore's entire district all the way to the Napa border, which would have just made, it was like the 5th was the whole county almost, in terms of geographic landmass. The other one took this very strange peninsula all the way over to the Flamingo Hotel in Eastern Santa Rosa, which also made 0 sense. And they also all actually split Sebastopol up from itself. So sort of south of Highway 12 was in the second, Bodega Highway was in the second, basically sort of taking all of those communities that are really part of Sebastopol and splitting them. So the consultant candidly has been horrible. They're from Arizona. They don't know the community. And I was like, do they just get drunk at night and draw these lines? Or like, what is the deal here? Because they really, really looked like kids coloring books. And a lot of the maps that came in from members of the community, I thought were far more astute and appropriate than the consultants.
Yeah, there is the reality of math. You can't escape of having a big chunk from the urban area. And I felt that the Roseland Moreland initiative was really driving the conversation. And it's just how do you make an adjustment to that? And that's the sausage making. That's where we are right now.
It's very accurate, Chair Farmer. And I would add that they all have ripple effects, right? So you sort of think, oh, I'm just going to do this one little thing and pull this community in here. And then, 2 other districts sort of have to swing over in different ways. So it is ultimately a math game.
We had just in our west part of District 5, a lot of energy about it as well. And we had basically 2 things that were put forward. One was to keep the coast united into one voice. And the other one was to, it's about communities of interest and equity. And one community of interest was how fire culture and how one lives with fire and prepares and fights fire. And that implied possibly dividing the coast among 2 districts. The voice for the keeping the coast united was very strong. And actually it was made one of the guiding rules on how they made maps. They didn't want any maps submitted that divided the coast, and ultimately didn't want to submit any maps that left Roseland and Moreland out of 3. And they chose to submit just the one. It's up to the Board of Supervisors now, and as Lynda says, there's time for input. Do we have any comments from the public, Jason?
currently don't have any hands raised in the public.
Okay. The thing I would like to bring out from our conversation on the West about the two approaches, dividing along fire and keeping one voice, is that there seems to be many people, when they think of West County, they think of the coast. And when they think of the coast, they think of the Highway 1 corridor. And there's a lot of inland hills that are part of the coast. And I just want to say that we need to speak with a broader and united voice to include the coast and the hills inland. We need your voice and support, and I know that there's some recognition of that. And I just, if you don't know what Zone 4 is, then I might be speaking to you. So please ask. Thank you. So anything else? Any other comments on this? Thank you, Lynda, very much. And so moving on, Tri-County Coastal Pledge and Initiative. I think Elise has a lot to say about this. Elise?
I do see a question in the question and answer asking a link to Eric's map. So possibly when we finish, sorry, I had to move my screen to see that. I'm trying to get to the share screen because I'd like you to.
Jason, are you able to put that in the chat, the link?
I'm searching for that now.
Thank you. Elise, please.
Okay, so Supervisor Hopkins may want to weigh in and talk to me about this, but I'll give it a start. Supervisor Hopkins, Supervisor Rodoni from Marin, and Supervisor Williams from Mendocino have been working on a tri-coastal pledge to improve stewardship for the for the entire Sonoma, Mendocino, and Marin, the entire North County coast. We've been meeting for several months. I had hoped that we would have Supervisor Rodoni's team here to do a presentation. They've promised me that they will join us in January. In the meantime, I'd like you to see the initial resolution that we're speaking of. The resolution will go before it's still in draft form. But this is a resolution for Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino, each to bring forward. In addition to this resolution, we're also looking at establishing a tri-county collaborative group that is staffed and funded that will look at ways to improve North Coast stewardship. So this is a starting point on this particular initiative, and I wanted to be sure that you guys were looped in while these things were still in draft form, rather than just launching them on you after it was all done. So, so we have this resolution of the whichever county board of supervisors to end coastal trash through stewardship education and increased enforcement in collaboration with the other counties, local jurisdictions, federal and state agencies, and nonprofits. And we have been working with having our meetings with state parks, with the regional parks of each county, and legislative team members and others. Whereas the Northern California coastline is known around the world for its scenic beauty, biological diversity, and recreational values, and is enjoyed by local residents, Northern Californians, and visitors from around the world. And whereas Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino counties welcome visitors and wish to ensure they do not adversely impact the beautiful landscape, seashore, and habitats of the coast. And whereas over 2,500 pounds of coastal trash is picked up annually in West Marin as part of the California Coastal Cleanup Day, and litter bugs me, over 10,000 pounds from Marin countywide, 38,000 pounds from Sonoma, and more. Whereas visitation decreased nationally due to the COVID-19 pandemic, California coastal beaches have seen a sharp rise in visitation as parks became a vital outlet for mental and physical health. With Stinson Beach having a 37% increase and Bear Valley Visitor Center saw a 100% increase. We've seen huge increases in Sonoma and Mendocino as well. Whereas COVID-19 has also spurred an increase in informal camping, especially along coastal beaches where visitation guidance, wayfinding information, and adequate facilities are lacking, setting the stage for contamination in our waterways, bays, ocean, and food supply. And whereas single-use plastic use has increased between 250 to 300% since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and other figures from Marin, whereas trash causes major impacts in our enjoyment of creeks, bays, and ocean, and creates significant impacts on aquatic life and habitat in those waters. Trash eventually enters the global ocean ecosystem where plastic persists in the environment for hundreds of years. Whereas trash in the ocean and waterways create physical impacts to aquatic species, moving up the food chain into our human food systems. I'm shortening it a little bit now. Whereas microplastic particles and fibers are now so prevalent that they cycle through the earth in a manner akin to global biogeochemical cycles. And whereas our local jurisdictions, agencies, counties, cities, and many nonprofit entities have separate existing trash reduction efforts underway, this effort is intended to unify the message and provide direction to the public to strengthen our collective impact. So that's the start of our Tri-County Coastal Initiative. And that's as I said, we will have a further presentation on this in January, but if this interests you and if you want to get involved in any way, let me know, and we'll keep you informed as this develops. Are there any questions on that?
And I just wanted to add a couple of things about sort of, you know, this is obviously a lot of whereases and kind of this formal resolution, but one of the goals is really to coordinate efforts and not to like create a new sort of government program, but to actually work with our existing nonprofits. I mean, we have obviously Coast Walk in Sonoma County that's extremely active, BRAD Foundation, Russian Riverkeeper, kind of who hold these regular cleanups. And so it's kind of about coordinating funding and resources and kind of making sure that we're looking at the whole coast, particularly when it comes to things like messaging, right? Because folks don't really care whether they're on this side or that side of the county line. It's all this beautiful stretch of coastline that they come to enjoy. So the goal is actually to have, yes, start with this resolution, but really develop those common programs along the coast. And then the other thing that's really important to those of us who are coastal supervisors who don't have other supervisors who share the coast with us is to get that formal blessing from all 5 supervisors in all 3 counties. And so that will actually sort of facilitate the allocation and commitment of resources, because then we can go to the CAO and say, look, we have this memorandum of agreement. We passed this resolution at all 3 of our boards. This is why regional parks needs to invest money in this. This is why, you know, we need to look at grant opportunities and things like that. So it also kind of gives us that cover as coastal supervisors to make sure that our other colleagues are on board as well. And Elise has done an awesome job working with this, with Marin and staff and Mendocino as well, and trying to coordinate between existing efforts that are within the county. So we look forward to hearing from everybody and working with all of our wonderful local nonprofit partners as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the council members? Comments? Enthusiasm? This is great. Please.
Scott, I was just going to say, it sounds like a wonderful program, and I'm glad to see that it's all the counties participating. It's one big long coastline.
Yeah. Brooks, please. Unmute yourself. Still muted. There you go.
Yeah, I know, couldn't find my cursor there. Anyway, no, I'm just glad to see that we're working forward on this, and, you know, hopefully we got some things implemented, because certainly in Sonoma County along the coast, we desperately need a lot of attention to, you know, trying to take care of all the plastic and the waste, and we need more porta potties and parking places. And so I'm hoping that this will help give us the impetus to move forward on these things, and we'll see some results sooner than later.
Hmm. Any other council member comments? Jason, anyone in the public wishing to comment?
Scott, I have one question. It's Paul.
Yeah, Paul, please.
Does the Board of Supervisors, Lynda, do they need some support from the MAC? I mean, I know we're going to have a presentation in January. Maybe after that presentation, the MAC can formally decide whether or not they support this as the total MAC or not.
I think that would be really welcomed. And that's actually something that I would like to get in the habit of doing more, trying to make sure that before we bring something before the full Board of Supervisors, that we actually have a formal letter of support and blessing from the Coastal MAC, if it is something that you want to see, because I think that does actually put pressure on my colleagues, to make sure that they recognize this is supported by the coastal community. We have representatives who are stepping forward and saying they want this program. And so I think that would definitely help that advocacy.
Will do.
Okay. So Jason, no hands up in the public Facebook.
No hands in the public. Well, we did have a late comment regarding redistricting come in on Facebook, and I'll go ahead and read that just to get it on record here.
Okay, please.
It's from John Paulson, and John states, I think this redistricting map is not in the best interest for District 5. I liked what you said about Eric Konenshofer's map and wonder why these maps are not presented. This seems to be being ramrodded through without much thought or public input. A consultant from Arizona was a bad call. They have no idea. Why does our county government hire consultants from afar? Geez, this just stinks. And we don't have any hands raised in our Zoom attendees.
Okay. Thank you, Elise. Looking forward to the as this goes forward. Moving on, we have let's see, get my notes here. Paul had wanted to talk about coastal water systems in light of the drought and water being a problem going forward, and especially in communities that don't have water districts. I think that this is really a chance. Maybe Elise has some things to present, but also this is a chance to really frame the issue and brainstorm. Elise, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, you guys brought this question to me, and I uncovered some intriguing things about our water systems. You guys are the experts because you've been living out there a lot longer than I've been in the area. I spoke with Sonoma County Water, I spoke with the California Water Board, as well as had a great conversation with Jamie, who is the head of the Russian River Utility District, and got some interesting background on this. We have a lot of small water districts up and down the coast and throughout all of District 5. They vary in terms of their water supply. So for example, the spring source at Salmon Creek is really strong. There are other areas that run out much sooner. We have companies such as Cassini out of the Lower Russian River, whose entire business is trucking water when wells start to dry up and fail during dry years. So we have a history of having too little water in the area. And when people who have lived here for generations, people are raised to know that water is scarce. And as those families move on and new people come in and visitors come in, they don't recognize the scarcity of the water, and they have to learn to be conservative. And that's a tough educational curve. Jamie particularly commented on how he's seen his grandkids' generation going to school and learning about the importance of water conservation, and now seeing the impact of that, the positive impact of that. So knowing about how important water education is to our communities. One of the questions we were looking at is, because what you guys posed to me is what happens when you start trucking water into a community. So I was asking, if you have a lot of water in one community and very little water in another community, what interaction is there? What communication is there during the drought? And I heard back very, very little. These are very far spaced out. There is no annual meeting of coastal water systems. There, I asked the water boards if they had, in Sonoma County Water, if they had a map of all the different water systems out there, and I have not been able to source one. So there isn't a lot of interaction, and so there isn't a lot of conversation about what happens in terms of drought. They just wait till it gets to a particular point, and then they start looking for other sources to get water trucked in. That seems to have worked for a while, for quite a long while. I don't know if with climate change coming and drought, flood years versus drought years being a specter, whether or not that needs to be addressed differently. There is no formal education and cooperating between the systems. I had asked how we can support this. Are the things county could be doing to support conservation measures? And there weren't any specific suggestion given, but I'm pretty sure that if we put our minds to it, we would come up with them. So fundamentally, I was wondering if we might be interested in having an ad hoc to answer some of these questions, maybe to make a map of coastal water systems, perhaps allow enabling or organizing a once annual meeting of the water systems people and having them come present to the MAC, or answer some of those questions. And so it might be of value to hear from the council members here what the water systems are, or what questions are out there to pose to the water system. Or we could look at it and say, because I'm a newcomer, but it may just be that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it looks to me like there are some opportunities here for the MAC to take on this sort of substantive issue.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Elise, for rounding up the information you're able to round up. I think actually having a presentation sometime in the spring from those who run the various water districts along the coast to identify what their contingency plans are. When you read in the paper about what Mendocino, the town of Mendocino, went through this year in order to, they were running out of water and they had to purchase water, and then I believe from Fort Bragg, and then that water, they weren't able to, Fort Bragg wasn't able to sell water into Mendocino. And there are also agreements that I know of, like Sea Ranch has a water district. There's restrictions on them selling water to anybody, and Sea Ranch has I can't quite remember what the number is, but it's something like 100 million gallon reservoir, plus some very, very large storage tanks. I guess my interest is today is, do other do council members for the MAC, do they have information about what was happening in their areas during this last summer? Was water low? And then of course there's a lot of people in District 5 who have their own wells, like you were saying. They may have to have water trucked into them. So I'm just kind of interested in what happened this year, first of all, just starting from that place, in the various areas like Timber Cove and Fort Ross, and places where there are water districts. I don't even know if Fort Ross has a water district or not.
Brian, your hand?
Yeah, so I know in Bega Bay, I'm in Serenado-Mar, which is north of Bega Bay itself, and we have our own little water district with Carmet, and we, I will admit to being something of a water nerd, and we had a few years ago, we had a presentation with the Russian River Water District who runs ours out of Forestville, exact something around that, and we were a couple years ago. I know we were pretty close to running out of water. I guess one of my concerns that somehow I don't know how we address it, because I know that the California PUC has a lot of say in how these things go, is that oftentimes I'll see vacation rentals where somebody's hosing off a boat, or just there will be a big user, and these local water systems, who have very little limited resources, have no means of incentivizing conservation other than the mild price increases. So if I use 250 units for personal use, and then somebody decides that they want to hose off their boat and they end up using 250 water units just for that, there's really the difference in price will be roughly $7 for a month. So somehow we can, if we can investigate how we can do more to incentivize conservation out here on these small water districts. Ours serves 300 meters, so it's a small small organization, but and I know we're not going to be able to necessarily deal with the PUC to get sort of more innovative strategies, but considering that probably half of our meters are on vacation rentals, it is something we need to consider.
Thank you. Marty?
Yeah, as we pursue looking at this issue, I'm curious to understand what, if any, interest the county has in establishing policy or practice across all these independent water districts, or whether the county is neutral and doesn't have any interest in influencing the districts. Because as Brian pointed out, I know our water district at Sea Ranch is regulated by the CPUC, and we have really strict regulations and strict accounting policies, et cetera, on how we run it and how we determine who our customer base is. And it's interesting to me. And it's something I've never thought about very much. And as I've become aware of how much in other subject matter areas than water, how much the visitors and the number of visitors coming to the coast affect the provision of services, I think we ought to be looking at the effect of the visitor base on people coming from outside the area and using some of these services that they only very indirectly pay for. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, I think one of the challenges is that there are so many different sizes and scales and even types of water districts, right? You have sort of ones with independent boards. They can actually range in size from just a handful, less than a dozen users to, many hundreds or thousands. You also have sort of the mutuals and, kind of larger companies that own them. And then actually Transportation and Public Works owns and operates a number of small water districts in Sonoma County and West County as well. But I do think that there is a need to have this conversation broadly, because for instance, right now at the state level, there's tons of money for drought resilience. And yet all of these kind of individual districts on their own don't necessarily have the capacity to go after with that funding. And so I almost feel like we need a grant to sort of, kind of try to create that institutional capacity, right, of bringing together all of these different water companies, and getting some staffing to start coordinating responses. And I think that we actually have a lot in common also with the second district, down in sort of southwest Sonoma County, because those are often some of the places that have the first wells to go dry. And so when we're kind of talking about, broad drought resilience, and especially when we look at the challenges along the coastline of possible saltwater intrusion, it's a big conversation. But I do think that there's an interest in the county. One of my interests is how do we coordinate on grant applications and things like that. So it's not just everybody for themselves, but actually we're all in this together. And if we find solutions, they should be common across all of these areas. So something to look into, and something that I can definitely bring up with our county administrative officer, and just inquire, especially I'll also talk to transportation and public works, since they own and operate a number of these, as well as Sonoma Water.
Elise, you're muted.
I
There you go.
wonder too if this could be part of, we should integrate this, obviously, it seems to me, into the Tri-Coastal Pledge, because if we're putting out education to tourism based institutions, one of the pieces should be conserve water. This is why. And so we want to incorporate that there as well.
Mhm. And Paul,
Yeah, Brian, when you were describing how you almost ran out of water, I think one thing that really interests me is your water company must have had a contingency plan, and just sharing those contingency plans might be very, very helpful from other small water districts to determine, what our area is doing.
you want to respond to that, Brian?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know what our folks did, but was basically what Elise said earlier, which is buying water from the Cassinis. So, which, not a great solution in that it was profoundly expensive, and we probably would have to get another loan to cover it, and when we already have a large outstanding loan. So it's not a great solution. And knowing our usage, there's definitely a space for some investment in order to both incentivize conservation, and then also to add additional storage, which is always probably a problem. And we also had a couple years ago, we had a problem with one of our tanks breaking, so that was a problem. Leaking 100,000 gallons was not great.
Lynda, it sounds like moving in the direction of grants would be very helpful for some of these small districts, small water districts.
Yeah. Liz, your hand is up.
Yeah. We have a huge concern about the water issue in Jenner. And what I've noticed through the years, because people, when you live in an area, you become, quite alert about things, especially the water. But I do think, since it is getting to be more of a tourist sort of destination, a heavy tourist destination, and people seem to think because they pay whatever amount of money for where they're staying, they're entitled to use the facilities, water, as much as they want. So I think, for a start, if you're going to do a tourism push in the area, that should be one of the huge, strictest, things that should be put out there, is that people really need to be aware of this situation. And, trying to deal with, it seems like with, the people here in town that are really up on our water system, Sharon Chang especially, that have had to deal with the system all these years and know the system really well. And they live here, so they have a different idea of which way we should go, as opposed to, I think, the Russian River people. But I think too, is if they would just, make sure that, we let all the tourists, for one thing, know, because people here in town, since we live here, are obviously concerned about it every day. But I do, hope that maybe we can get as much of a plug in about it, through the tourism board for a start,
Yeah, thank you.
So-
I'm curious, Abby, did Kashaya manage to get through the summer without buying water? I think your picture's frozen.
They're pretty expensive to do that.
Did you have to truck it in?
Yeah.
Mm. You get your water out of the river,
Yeah,
but
cool. Mm.
Mhm. Thank you. And Cindy, I don't know if Timber Cove needed to buy water for their district, do you?
Yeah, we didn't need to buy it this year because the rain kind of saved us, but in previous years, we have had to buy it from Cassini's, not
Cassini's.
recently, but.
So what I get is that maybe we need to, in fact, have an ad hoc, if nothing else, to sort of figure out who we are, and sort of define who we are around this subject. And then the second part is that the county think in terms of bringing the water districts together, about educating them about, and maybe around grants. And third is in the tri-county group to expand on that. Does that make sense, Elise and Lynda? And if Marty, if you agree that we have, when we get to the ad hoc portion, we can establish an ad hoc to sort of take this up.
Yeah, I agree. I
Okay.
mean, I think we've heard from lots of members of the MAC that this is an idea worth pursuing.
Yeah.
And I'll defer to Paul.
Okay. So I don't, is there anyone in the public that has their hands raised or at Facebook? Jason.
We don't have any hands raised, but we do have one comment in the Q&A from Janet Smithheimer, and it's the LAFCO for Sonoma County has to profile all of the water districts every 5 years in a report. This is a good starting point to understanding all of the districts, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then without any more comments, let's move on to let's see, ad hoc reports. Brian, would you like to, as chair, discuss the land use committee?
Absolutely. All right, so we had a meeting on October 26th. Where myself, Scott, as a member of that ad hoc, and Beth Bruzzoni, we discussed a few items. Much of it was to sort of discuss how we are getting information and how we are processing that information in order for the MAC to be able to weigh in on some of those land use matters, especially with respect to those event permits, because many of them are both rapid in that there's only a few days notice sometimes, and then we have to respond to those quickly, and then we may not get them in time. So we had, for example, we had a bicycle race that went through Valley Ford, where some of the local businesses did not know about it until they started putting up infrastructure there, and then the fire department, the volunteer fire department, did not know either. So we'd like to sort of work on some of those issues of making sure that the community notification process is better, and that we as a MAC are able to get that information through our process, and so that we can, when practical, get those through the land use subcommittee, so that both that folks will know from us, and then that the communities will be able to inform us as well. And a lot of those issues are concern Caltrans, because they are, much of that is Caltrans permitting, but a lot of it is ministerial, so that it is the county kind of has to do those. So, and they have short notice periods, so we're trying to get through that. And then eventually we're going to try to get on the Sonoma Coast MAC website some sort of email address so that the public, when they know of events or permitting issues that we should know about, that they can contact us. And then we had a discussion about the Estero, but I don't know if Elise, did you want to discuss that, or?
Elise, are you going to cover the Estero Americano in your staff comments?
I'm happy to cover it here because we did discuss it there. I'm not sure that there's much to cover. The several MAC members brought up some issues with the Estero. It's, you know, as you guys know, it is at the very bottom. It's at the very line between Sonoma and Marin. And it just so happened that we had one of those tri-county coastal meetings right the day after you guys brought it up. And so the issues that have come up are primarily safety issues and access. There was concern about people accessing the Estero from unsafe spots, getting stuck there after dark, being on the Estero when hunting season is happening, and maybe hunters don't know there are people on the area, and people don't know that there's hunting going on behind them. So there were a number of different issues that came up, and so I spoke with the head of parks for both Sonoma and Marin, since we were already in that meeting, as well as Supervisor Redoni and his team. And they agreed that there was an issue there, that every time they put signs up, they get pulled down and brought home for trophies. And so putting up signage is an issue. We're not sure how best to communicate on that issue, but we do have a meeting scheduled for December 13th. It's a ways out because getting this entire crew of people together takes some time. So we have the head of regional parks for each county, the supervisor Redoni. We have a couple others. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, the roads, the transportation and public works from each county. Beth has asked to join. I'm checking with the other committee members if that's okay. We also will have I think we will, yeah, we'll also have the head of the Wildlands Conservancy, which does have plans to launch guided tours on the Estero, and so that will factor in as well. So all those questions are going to be brought up. So if you have additional questions about the Estero that you want to be brought up in that meeting, please feel free to raise your hand and let me know, or put something in the chat or send me an email, because we do have that meeting coming up to look at those items, and happy to bring up any concerns that you guys may have.
Okay, thank you. Beth, if this is a good time, if you want to comment, raise your hand. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Scott. So there have been several incidences, but particularly there was a group of Boy Scouts that ended up on the Estero in a canoe trip, unprepared and unaware of what was going on. They had adults with them as well. I'll condense this, but there were a lot of issues regarding their safety, and that was what begat me bringing this to the Land Use Committee. Is this is something we might want to look at? How can we help solve the safety issue? I think it's wonderful that there's an upcoming meeting in the middle of December to look at many things, but this as well. I would think that the landowners, the property owners, the private property owners rather, that are abut the Estero also might like to participate in this meeting. I think this is good. This is good communication. I think that the more communication we have, the better. And I appreciate this coming up this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from the public? Jason? Brooks, your hand is up.
Yes. I wanted to address this to Brian. I know, gosh, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, I think your committee and the land use committee from Lower Russian River Mac talked about the special events, and you came up with a number of things that you wanted to submit to Permit Sonoma to consider, because they were redrawing the I don't know, I guess the outline or requirements for events. Has that ever happened? I mean, you're sounding as if nobody's responded to
Right.
concerns that you
Well,
had.
Yeah, and I know that Elise has been banging her head on this particular wall for a while. And we did go through sort of some lists, some email servers that we're trying to get additional information from Permit Sonoma. But I know there is a process, maybe at least if you know the sort of the progress of sort of those permitting changes, but I know there are some changes being focused on that, but I don't know the status of that.
You know, I just want to double check with Supervisor Hopkins whether she's seen anything come through. I haven't. My understanding is that all the suggestions of the land use committee were given vehemently to Permit Sonoma and the leader of this, and that it was put into the suggestions for updating the permit process for events. And actually, funnily enough, I was looking at the LinkedIn profile for the permit guy, and he puts as his accomplishments having updated the events stuff at Permit Sonoma. So, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. So I'll keep looking, and as soon as we get that, I'll get it to the MAC.
Just to be clear, the events are really the bigger problem. The land use permit, we actually got on the list to be notified, and Mary got it to us quite early. So there's a half a win there.
Good.
Having Mary around to focus and track things down is hugely helpful. So.
Okay, is there anything else on the on this? Because we also have attached to this is the LCP update. And the LCP has really kind of left our realm and is in the Planning Commission's realm. And they, with our request and many others, they have stretched the process out, and you can participate in great detail. And they're taking it topic by topic and working it down to phrasing. And they're working through as many topics at each meeting as they can. It's averaging 1 or 2. So the next meeting I have is December 9, and they're going to take up transit and circulation, water, and ag if they have time. The last meeting, they only had 19 participants. So a lot of people wanted this stretched out. They need to participate. This is a great opportunity to really affect the language, and I think it's being greatly improved by this process. And I thank Eric for Koningshofer for making this happen. Okay.
Scott?
Yes.
I'd like to say that I agree with you, but the meeting was advertised as a 2-hour meeting, and it lasted for 4 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're planning to go, plan on spending longer than the allotted time. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I believed the schedule they had.
Yeah.
So I missed the last half of the meeting. So in the future, I'm going to plan to spend the afternoon.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Brian,
then,
yes, please, Brian.
Yeah, so and we'll try to make sure we get some of that, those planning commission meetings out to as many, see if we can promote those a little bit as well.
Okay. So is that everything, Brian, then for your committee?
Yeah, I believe that's all from the land use committee.
Okay. Last call for comments, seeing none and seeing none from the community. Moving on.
We do have, Chair, we do have Beth Bruzzoni. She has her hand raised.
Okay, please, Beth.
Go ahead,
Thank
Beth.
you. Thank you. I just wanted to add, very similar to what Marty was saying, that the subject matter is deep, and people comment. A lot of comments are coming in to the Planning Commission, and these meetings are running much, much longer than they had anticipated. And they're not able to go through as much material as they had hoped. So the meetings are once a month, as Brian said, the 9th, December 9th is going to be the next one. Hoping to end them sometime in the spring, but do check the Planning Commission's website regularly, because the schedule is changing because of how long it's taking to get through each element.
Right. Okay, thank you. Let's see. So Marty, I believe your ad hoc met. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Shall we, at this time, since we're on ad hocs, I'd like to call for a new ad hoc, and this will be water. And we don't need a motion. I'm just going to call for it. And so we have 4 spots. Are there council members and also the alternates can join this as well? Are there people that would like to volunteer for this ad hoc water? Paul, it was your idea.
Yeah, I guess I should be on the ad hoc.
Beth would like to be on the ad hoc.
What did you say? Did you volunteer Beth?
Yeah, Beth just texted me. She'd like to be on the ad hoc.
Okay, that's 2. Abby, would you like to? Water, aren't you working with the water in Kashaya?
Yeah, I could be on it.
Great. That's 3. Let's see, we've got one down south, we've got one up north, one kind of a little south of that.
Jenner.
Jenner, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna raise people's hands for them.
Well, I will say, I mean, I am on the land use committee, so, but I am a water nerd and I love water stuffs, but I am happy to let somebody else if anybody else wants to.
Well, we can
Go
always make adjustments if people want to, So there we go. We have 4. And
Brian, did you volunteer?
Well, I did volunteer, but I'm the
Okay.
chair of the land use committee. So, but if somebody else is interested in doing it, if one of the new alternates or new members are interested, I'm happy to.
so then you don't have to be chair on this one.
Thank you.
Oh, do I have a volunteer for chair? We have Abby, Paul, and Beth.
Why don't we let them meet and
Okay.
get to know each other and then decide who wants to be
So
chair?
what I'll do is we'll give Brian one task, and that's to call a meeting among the 4 of them. And then they can decide amongst themselves who would like to. Is that fair enough?
Works for me.
All right, thank you. So then moving on, we have, let's see. I'm in the wrong place here. So does staff reports, let's do staff reports now. Elise?
Thank you. So you guys given me another question, which is that of the Annapolis yard. Scott, you may want to frame this about what your question was.
Okay, I'm going to ask Annie Cresswell, who's in the gallery, to raise her hand, and she can frame this for us. Annie? You still there?
I'm looking for her. I don't see her.
I'll start it. We're talking about the Transportation Public Works Corporation Yard, which is in Annapolis, which is inland from the Sea Ranch. And traditionally that has been a year-round yard. Local residents worked from that yard. A number of years ago, I think during a budget crunch, they moved their time clock to Healdsburg. So they would drive into Healdsburg, clock in, and then go out on their workload, and then return to Healdsburg, clock out, and then drive back to Annapolis. Really inefficient. And so what we're asking now is that the Corporation Yard in Annapolis be made again a year-round facility, thereby giving more work time to the workload in our area, given the need for, they work on the surfaces, they work on the fuels along the side of the road. That's the crux of it. And if Annie's not here to comment, she had more detail and will speak with Johannes. They just haven't connected quite yet, I think.
So we have set up a meeting with Annie and Johannes because I know that I was playing telephone between on this issue, trying to, that's so funny, my picture's backwards, my hand's actually over here. Anyway, so I was playing telephone of trying to adequately describe the question and then having Johannes come back and say no, and then you guys saying, but what about this? And, you know, it was just going back and forth. So Annie and Johannes are going to meet and talk about it. At the same time, I did have a conversation with Johannes where he said that this has been attempted a couple times because of this request. Apparently the person who was head of TPW before Johannes tried to run it full time, and it's been estimated that it would be over $1 million more a year to do this, and that they have not been able to find justification for that. So I did still ask for Annie and Johannes, because you know, you have brought it up multiple times and there's a petition asking for it. So there's a lot of community desire for this to happen. And so Johannes is going to talk with Annie and talk about possible solutions and what those concerns are, and dive down into details that I really can't adequately telephone about, so that it's not an absolute, this is it, there's more conversations, but at the same time, there is a big roadblock there in terms of the cost. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's the piece that I know of.
Okay, fair enough. To be continued.
Yep. The next thing I wanted to bring up, which has come up a couple times lately, is community engagement and outreach. We have in both MACs, interestingly enough, declining participation, both in the voting process, the nomination process, and the meetings themselves. And that's of concern, because we certainly want to be, we don't need to be entertaining, but we need to be doing things that are responding to the communities that we're in. And so I would like Chair Farmer for us to look at the beginning of the new year, or whoever the chair is at that point, of looking at revitalizing the community engagement ad hoc. I would also ask the representatives, because I think that to some degree it may be representative of COVID and the fact that we haven't been out in the community. We haven't been out talking to people and getting information out. When important community news gets out, like the announcement of the TIF grants opening, I'm surprised at how many nonprofits I've reached out to who have never heard of it. So I'm wondering if we're doing a good job reaching out with information to our nonprofit organizations and to our communities. So I'd like you all to be thinking about that, thinking about what is possible given COVID, how we can improve our engagement and outreach. I would open up this question to the attendees and the Facebook people. I also bring this up because when I was out looking for some great new people to join the MAC, one of the fire chiefs said to me that they didn't feel the MAC had lived up to its promise. And that to me is sort of like, well, what is the promise that we're not meeting? So it would be a great thing to find out from our constituents. Are there things that they would like us to be addressing that we're not addressing? You know, we really don't get a lot of agenda items coming from people other than council members, but I think this is an important thing. So COVID is probably one thing. A second thing is that when we started the MAC, we had we put the expense of sending out the postcards to get votes and things like that. And we haven't done that since, mainly because it was hugely expensive. And the amount of return was very, very little. The number of postcards that came back was fewer than 1% of those that were sent out. And so, you know, if we're going to spend $15,000 on doing a mailer, it needs to return better than that. But at the same time, we need to start thinking creatively about how we can reach out to people, get them engaged, you know, have these conversations, and get something going on. Water ad hoc is a great way to do it. That's a topic on everyone's mind, and the possibility of maybe having, you know, small meetings in your community outdoors to talk about water and water concerns might be something to think about as on a sunny day. So that's my thought around community engagement. Do you guys have any input or ideas around that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Shay, please.
I would just say, you know, and I've dropped the ball on this at the last couple meetings, but I used to drop off flyers at our local post office, which for, you know, as we all know, a lot of our folks do not have access to the internet or not on the internet a lot. And the post office is where they get a lot of their information. And so that was really helpful. People would be able to walk in and see that there was going to be a meeting and these were the issues that were involved. So that's something I suggest to some of my compatriots on the MAC.
And in Timber Cove, we have a steering committee, which was formed to start the process when the MAC was formed, but has continued to be in support of the reps. And we've expanded our steering committee and to be more broad and touching different parts of the community. That's helpful.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Anyone from the community want to comment?
Hands raised, Chair.
Please. No hands, you said?
No hands.
Okay, got it. All right, let's move on. Elise, please continue.
Boy, it's all about me today, isn't it? I know that Lynda and I both want to thank Brooks, and Lynda, you may want to jump in, and because she was here from the very beginning before I started with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I do, you know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, the first, I felt like year or two of the MAC really was trying to answer that question, kind of who are we and what are we doing? And so, you know, Brooks, your leadership, your steadfast leadership, your consistency in terms of comments and just representing the interests of your community and always having really thoughtful insights as things came before the MAC really influenced, I think, getting a pretty rapid launch to this Municipal Advisory Council. And so I'm just really proud and happy with how far we've come. And it's really thanks to our founding members. So in honor of your last meeting with the Coastal Municipal Advisory Council, I just wanted to say a heartfelt thank you for your service and gratitude for your leadership to the coastal community these past few years. And I really do believe that you are in large part, you know, one of the main reasons, like this is why we're here, right? It's to serve the community, it's to bring these issues forward, and it's to keep making sure that we are relevant to Elise's point. So what's the next big thing? How do we work through it as a community? And you've always had such a collaborative, thoughtful perspective. So thank you for your service, Brooks.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
one thing I might say is that, 3 years ago, when the original council was elected and we were sitting as a group, we got to know each other because the first few meetings, were public meetings, and so there was a kind of a warm feeling, and we did have a couple of committees that I served on, and so we sat as a committee and discussed things. Then, of course, along came the pandemic, and every public things just got closed down. Zoom came along. It's worked, but there's a disconnect, I think, still, and I really, really hope that in the future, very near future, this next spring, that you can have public meetings again, and maybe on a Saturday midday. That 55 miles is like 100 miles for us having to go up north at night in the wintertime, or vice versa coming down. So maybe we could have hybrid meeting where part of the council would meet, and we could have our public communities come in, and then part would be Zoom, and then the next meeting could be in another region. But I really do think that in person has just so many more advantages, and the sooner that we can work towards that, I think it's going to be a big help to the council. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Bring up a really good question around whether or not Wednesday night is the best option for this. Perhaps we can put another question to the council and think for a bit about whether it would be best to have a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon, or if we lose people because it would be a busy weekend, or what would be the best time and day to engage the community. And possibly that might be a good thing to ask community members. Sorry, Marty, I jumped in front of your hand. I apologize.
No, my hand was raised in response to what you just said. I would like to see us consider having it on a different day and having it on a Sunday afternoon. Because it's a big commitment for everybody, especially in the winter months when it gets dark so early, and when hopefully the weather is going to be bad.
Yeah.
To drive all over the county.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
I want to second the call for some different scheduling of the meetings. That would be fantastic. And I would like to eventually be able to do these in person at some point so that we can actually get more people involved. The other thing is I'd also like to thank Brooks for her help. And when I joined the committee and started, she was very helpful. So thank you, Brooks.
You're welcome.
Jay?
Just pushing back a little bit on the weekend meetings. I think for a lot of us that are working, and these evenings are great, but weekends are obviously precious, and I think it would limit the number of younger folks that are working that would be interested and engaged.
Yeah, I'll say in Timber Cove, our volunteer firefighters train on Wednesday nights, so they're not able to participate. Okay. Elise, you have more? You're muted, but I wanted to ask, is there an update on the short-term rental ordinance? Last I recall, they were really talking about maybe bringing in business licenses to try to be a part of that. Maybe you or Lynda would like to speak to that.
Yeah, so I actually believe that there is a vacation rental ordinance workshop coming before the Planning Commission very soon. So I will try to get that information and either email it to you, or if we're able to do it in real time, to share it in the chat. And yes, business licenses are definitely a part of that conversation. Unfortunately, for the Coastal MAC, the Coastal Commission has determined that even the business license process would have to be folded into the local coastal plan. So I continue to push staff on how much we can get into the local coastal plan as it moves through the process, as opposed to we get the local coastal plan through the process and then we have to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch and do another process. So I'm continuing to advocate for that, because I do think that we need some kind of essentially sort of nuisance ordinances and controls on the books, right, for vacation rentals, so that people have recourse. And really one of the most important things, I think, is the ability to call someone and to have problems addressed promptly. And to really put sort of the onus on the property manager to make sure that their guests are not impacting neighbors. It's not very popular in the vacation rental industry, but it's totally implemented successfully already in Lake Tahoe. Some places actually require that you post a number that's sort of visible from the outside, so that if you're having concerns, you don't have to actually go and approach, you know, the guests, that you can actually see a phone number to call to sort of register a complaint in real time. And you know, the vacation rental industry says that it potentially leads to safety concerns, but again, this has been implemented in other counties and it hasn't had those sort of safety impacts, at least from what I've heard talking to some of the leaders up in those communities. So, and it looks like Elise maybe followed up on the planning commission information.
Elise?
Yeah, I've just put it in the chat. It's actually tomorrow at 1:05 p.m. And I'm trying to find the Zoom information. I'm going to put it here. The agenda notice also in the chat, but you can also find it by going and looking on Permit Sonoma.
Okay.
There you go.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. So I don't see any hands raised, and Jason, you can confirm if there's still no hands in the public. If that's the
Chair.
case. Pardon?
No hands in the air, Chair.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for council members to have the floor to speak. To any council members, and then I'm going to invite the alternates an opportunity after that. Does anyone want to have the floor for something to talk? Okay, not seeing any hands. Any alternates in the gallery that want to speak something that they've not had a chance in this meeting, please feel free to raise your hand. And I gather there's none. So moving on, this is a call for new agenda items. Our process is intended to be open and transparent, and anybody in the public, council members, anyone can put forward agenda items. A lot of this agenda that we went over tonight was generated from mostly council members putting things forward and District 5 staff. So you can, as the public, or can share it with their rep or with District 5 staff directly. Please speak what's on your mind, and we will fit it into the agenda. Jay, is your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up one thing. I think this may be of interest to a lot of the landowners out there. It's just some education from the Northern Sonoma County Air Districts. I can never remember. Basically, that there is, we can do pile burns, right? We're in burning season, but under those pile burns, you can also get a smoke permit exemption, and private landowners can actually burn under 3 acres on their own properties and do small controlled burns. I'd love to hear some education about how to get that, because it was a little bit confusing for me to get in there, and I've done it twice now. And then, talking about maybe getting some folks to talk about how to do that safely, and I can bring in some of the fire forward people if that would be helpful.
So a presentation on prescribed burn procedures and policy.
Sub 3 acres. So, private rights. Essentially.
Got it. Less than 3 acres.
Which is obviously a concern, and we want to make sure people are doing that safely.
Absolutely. And liability issues and all that. Okay. Something else? Okay. I think that concludes our meeting. Did we make it? We have a little extra time. Unless you want to use it, we can adjourn. Cindy?
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
I'll make a
moved.
motion.
Okay, so
Paul beat
Jay,
me to it.
Second,
Second, yeah.
and second was who? I'm sorry.
Marty.
Marty, okay. I thought we were just going to stay on. Okay, let me go through roll call here. Jay, Scott,
Yes?
Marty,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Abby,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Brooks, and thank
Yes.
you, Brooks.
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and okay. So it's 7:06 and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks, and thank
Thank
you. Lynda.
you. Thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Brooks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.